Hi there, everybody. This is Eris Creates with Artpreneurs, where I teach independent creatives how to never choose between their art and their income again. And today I'm bringing you a Tip Trick Thursday, and I want to talk about story because this came up in a recent meeting in my membership where we were talking about brand and being the face of something and building something big. Now, before I get too deep into this, I want to let you know that if you're watching live, it'd be great to hear from you. I may not be able to see your name, so you can give permissions for that. So make sure that you're messaging or responding in some way in the comments because I might be able to catch those. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on the subject for today, or your thoughts on some other subjects that you'd like to hear about in the future. If you're watching the replay, drop a 2 in the links for me so I know that you caught this. And any other comments that you'd like to make, you can make and I'll be reviewing them. But for starters, let's get into story. Let's talk about why story is important to your creative career or your art business, because it's actually important to anybody's business. It's also important to relating to other human beings and networking and creating rapport with others. But story plays into business in a very particular way. And a lot of people get a little hung up on the idea of telling story or stories in general, just knowing that they have to share something personal, or they might feel like they have to talk about things that are a little too private in public to get people's attention, and that's not necessarily true. Story is generally narratives. It's the things we do to move people through a process of understanding. It is to relay information or a memory of something. And story is generally just taking people through that emotional ride. It is often told in words, but sometimes can be told in visuals and other types of experiences. But let's talk about how story can be used by you in your art business, your creative career, because it's so important. Story is so important because as human beings, this is what we relate to. In fact, there's a lot of research that explains that our brains relate to stories better than any other types of information. We retain more information through story, and we can relate emotionally to story. In fact, when some people are telling stories to others, their brains get into what is called an alignment. They mirror each other in terms of how their energy is working and where their brains are firing. So this type of neuro patterning creates a connection between humans. And this is why story is important. Now, story becomes really important in your business because you have to tell a lot of stories to get people to understand you. And the reason is we want people to know, like, and trust us. So it's important that they understand who we are, what we stand for, what we care about. So I encourage people who are working on their creative careers and art businesses to share stories. It doesn't have to be everything at once, and it doesn't have to be a big deal, and it doesn't have to be the things you don't want to share publicly. The reason why you want to get really clear on your stories is because you want to curate the things that are important and leave out the fluff. So one good way to do this is to sit down and talk about the things, or to write down the things that you actually think in your experiences relate to what you're trying to do now in your career or business. This is good for writing bios. It's great for social media and sharing content. It's also really good for creating an origin story for people to understand where you came from and why you do the thing that you do. So I encourage you to work on story a lot. Now, story has structure, and there's a lot of different structures, but there are some main key ones I'm not going to go deep into today, but go ahead and take a look, do a quick search about story structure. And you'll find that there's things like their hero's journey and other structures that can help you to create stories that create good narratives, that don't leave people hanging, that don't leave them stuck in a place. If you're going to tell a story, it doesn't always have to be your own as well. So that's something to think about. Sometimes you can tell stories about others. And the reason why that's really cool is because if you are an insightful person and you are on a very special path, you're going to be looking at the things around you that come into your world and the things that you get excited over and the way that you hear other people's stories, and you take that information in and you actually put it through your own filter, and then you can put those stories out and explain why it's important to others that they listen to those stories. Now, by telling other people's stories, you're giving people hope, you're giving them a chance to dream, you're giving them something to look forward to. You can also tell your own stories. So one of the things that you need to think about is which stories of your own do you want to share and which stories of other people inspire you and keep you going? Would you want to share those with others to explain the reason why you keep moving through your career or your business? Story is also super important in structuring the ways that you communicate with people in things like email marketing or the ways that you talk and you give speeches. So those things can all play on story. So my big tip for the day is settle into a spot where you can get really quiet and you can retrospect and reflect on the things that you've learned in your life, the things you've experienced. Sit down and write some of the key experiences that you've had and think about the stories around that. And then consider what you're trying to do and where you're headed and what you think you want in your life and your business. And write down the stories that relate to what you're trying to go for. Do you have metaphors? Do you have things that you can give parables about? Do you have learning moments that you can share with people through those stories? Make a list of those stories and flesh them out. And when you start to do that, you'll see that you have a ton of content that you can share, and you don't have to ever worry about having something to say when you go live like this, or when you write an email, or when you get on social and you want to do a month's worth of content. You'll have stories to be a big basis for that. Good luck, and once again, leave it in the comments if you're watching a replay, and let me know what kinds of other content you'd like to see and hear.